All right, good morning. So let's start where we stopped yesterday. Let me just remind you at which point we got and spend some time justifying that it was actually making a lot of sense for us to consider contracts So those were the terminal value of such a process y that I'm indexing by y0 and z here, where we knew exactly what the dynamics of this was. Let me just introduce this notation here. This is the soup over a of this function I introduced 2 days ago. We had an additional term, so there might be some discrepancies in the signs. That one is the correct formula, but I might have messed up the signs last time. So this should be sigma squared vs squared. All right, so this is what we did, and the reason was that after some arguments, we managed to prove that for any contract, general ones, we could always find such a y0 and such a z, and the contract would be the terminal value of something like this. So I was telling you we should take things the other way around. Instead of starting with a contract that's a random variable and then finding y0 and z, we're just going to give these two guys to ourselves, construct the contract, and see what we can do with this. So that was the object of the last theorem I wrote, where I was claiming that if you offer a contract like that to the agent, the utility that he gets would be minus exponential minus gamma a of y0, and in the case where you have quadratic cost, the only optimal effort that he can make for that contract was z over c, which was, in this case, the unique maximizer appearing here. All right, so let's just check that. It's relatively straightforward. The only thing that actually requires maybe a little bit of work is setting up the integrability space for z here in a way that everything matches, but that's the thing I've avoided to do here. So it works, huh? I mean, I'm avoiding it just because it doesn't bring much to the table. It's just really a matter of writing, knowing exactly what you need, and putting it as assumption for z there. So my point, yeah, I claimed that I had this equality, c equals c. How do you prove this? That's the one that's extremely easy. So the reasoning from last lecture actually showed that this inclusion was true, because I started from an arbitrary contract here, and I proved that I could find a constant y0, I could find a process z, such that the contract would be written in that way. That's actually the hard direction that we get here immediately. And the other one is for free. The other one is for free. Why? Because elements here are just ft measurable, f capital T measurable random variables, and I've put in the definition of that set that they would satisfy all the integrability conditions I need. All right, so the other inclusion is trivial.
You are now unmuted.
Was I muted? Well, so for everyone else, hopefully that's self-explanatory. Okay, so the reverse inclusion is actually immediate by definition. Good. So the next thing I need to check now is my claims that when I offer such a contract to the agent, I can compute his utility in a straightforward way. So let's fix an arbitrary effort, and what I want to do is compute the utility that the agent gets when he receives this salary here and chooses to do this arbitrary effort alpha. All right? So I know what this is. This is exactly the expectation under P alpha of the utility of the agent, which is the salary. So yt y0 z here minus accumulated cost between 0 and capital T. And now what do I do? Well, I have dynamics for y, so I'm just going to substitute all of this inside the expectation and see where this takes us. All right, so first, there is the constant part with y0 that I can take out of the expectation. And the minus sign, might as well do that. Now I need to do several things that I'm going to skip a little bit. The dynamics I've written here is under the original probability measure P, because X is morally sigma dB. And I'm doing computations under P alpha, so I'd rather have the Brownian motion B alpha there. So I'm just going to add the drift that's necessary. So if you do all of this, you should get that I'm going to be left with two things. One of them should be the integral here from 0 to t of. I should have, so this is minus, and it comes with a plus, so this is plus here. I will get this h, okay, that's already there in the dynamics. There is c of alpha that's there. And then there is an additional drift term that comes from the fact that I switch from B to B alpha. So if you do this carefully, you should get that here you will get this minus alpha s zs plus c of alpha. Okay. And then there are two more terms. One is the gamma A sigma squared ZS squared that was already here. And there is the stochastic integral part. All right? So let me just isolate those two. So for these, you should get exactly this, so minus gamma A sigma ZS dB alpha and minus sigma squared gamma A squared over 2 ZS squared ds. All right. That should be everything. Well, now you should remember what h is. H is the supremum over any value of A of alpha sz minus t of A here. So this quantity is non-negative. All right? So now let me check if my signs are correct. So if I go that way, the signs are not correct because I have minus and this is, oh no, yeah, we're good. Yes, this is greater than 0. Because I have a minus sign now, I can say that this is always less than well, now this term here, I can replace it by 1. And I'm just left with this here. And now this is a stochastic exponential. That's exactly the stochastic exponential of this martingale here. It's in particular a super martingale because it's a non-negative local martingale. So I know that this, I don't know if it's equal to 1, but at least I know it's less than 1. Right? Simply because stochastic exponentials of continuous martingales, in this sense, their expectation is always bounded by 1. So I just proved that the utility here was less than this. All right, so two things happen here. H is the supremum of this quantity, so that term can be bounded from above, and this stochastic integral here has expectation less than 1. Now, of course, if I want to finish, what do I need to do? I need to prove that I can attain this upper bound, right? This is telling me that for any choice of effort, I will never get more than this. And I claimed in the theorem that I would actually exactly gain this. So I just need to find one control that's actually giving me equality. So how do I get equality? Well, I need to have equality here. And there is only one way to get equality here, is to choose the control alpha in such a way that this minus this is equal to 0. And when I take quadraticos, there is only one way to do that. So now, if we take alpha s to be zs over c, which is the unique maximizer in the definition of H. The first inequality is an inequality, and that's the only way I will get equality. Now, how do I get equality here? I need to make sure that this expectation is 1. That's integrability properties I have to put on z, because I need to make sure that this, when alpha is taken to be z over c, is sufficiently integrable, so I just put this in my integrability requirements. If you check back a little bit, what I did in when I was doing everything the other way, I was starting with an arbitrary contract. This stochastic exponential already appeared there. If you check it, I had said something about, yes, I'm writing down martingale representation in a multiplicative form, and I'm writing it with minus gamma A sigma just because it's easier. That's exactly the same guy. So from the previous reasoning, I actually know when I start with a general contract that this is a true martingale. Okay, so there's no loss of generality when you actually try to do everything properly to assume in the definition of the integrability space for z that this remains a martingale. Just a little point here, but there is no gap there. It does work exactly the way you want. So second inequality is also an equality by integrability properties of z in that set calligraphic z that I mentioned. And then you're done. Then I have proved that the value that the agent gets is exactly equal to this, which was one of my claims. And how do I attain this? There is only one possibility. I need to take the effort that's given here. Okay? So, and that proof is super short. You just plug everything down and check that it works. And it's short because the form we found for the contract over there is really exactly tailor-made so that this verification here works easily. All right. So before continuing, let me give a remark at this stage. I mentioned the word verification when I was doing this, and that's not innocent. Basically, what I just did here is the equivalent, if you want, of a verification theorem in optimal stochastic control. So let me maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, because you can actually make all of this much simpler if you have additional information. So here, even if we did not use any results from backward stochastic differential equation theory, I already had examples of these things showing up in optimal control problems in Pierre's lectures, where he was linking some of the mean field game problems to forward-backward systems of SDEs. We actually proved that for any psi in C, so for any contract, the pair, so what I was calling YXI and ZXI, I remember YXI was the certainty equivalent of the utility of the agent. Z was the guy that was appearing in martingale representation when we were working with this. We did prove that this solved a BSD. You just check the dynamics that I wrote. This is exactly what's written. So the BSD was this one. Terminal condition is the contract. Is it minus or plus? Should be plus. And minus. Okay? So that's a consequence of what we've proved. Nothing new here, huh? I'm not claiming any novelty. If you check the paper by El-Karoui, Peng, and Kenes on BSDs and applications to finance, you already have there clearly a link made on BSDs and solutions to certain optimal control problems, right? So there's absolutely nothing surprising there. So that's just another way of doing the proof. The point is more along the following lines. What I started by doing is give me a contract. I will prove then that the associated value function for the agent solves this equation. And I worked for this. You need to check several different things. It's not the most complicated proof, but you do have to work a little bit. It's similar when you are working with optimal control to the situation where you have a Markovian optimal control problem. You are going to work with proving that the value function is a viscosity solution to the associated Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation. It's not too hard, but as soon as you know that you have some form of dynamic programming principle, you can do it. Right? And you relate this value function of your problem to some sort of equation. Obviously, there is also another way to do this, which is much simpler. but doesn't always work, which is the case where you just write down immediately the Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman equation, you look for a smooth solution, and if you can find one, then you use a verification argument that's going to tell you, yes, that smooth solution to the AGB equation is my value function. I can also do something like that here. I can just say that I know that there is, at least at the formal level, a BSD associated to my problem. And if I have results that tell me that there exists, say, a unique solution to this equation, then I can try to work my way and say, let's define solution to this equation and prove that it's equal to the value function. If I can do that, it's much faster than everything that I have done, because I rely on existence results for the BSD, and then I just say, look, it coincides with the value function, so I have the representation that I was claiming, and then I can keep going forward. So now, of course, the question is it true that you have nice existence results there at this stage? So already in this case, it's a little bit annoying because I did not bound efforts. So this thing here is quadratic in Z. So you have existence and uniqueness results, and they would typically here, if I assume that Xi has exponential moments of any order, I'm pretty sure, yes, if I have exponential moments of any order, because that thing here should be convex or concave. One of the two should work the way it's needed. That would allow you to make sure that you have existence and uniqueness of a solution where Z is going to be, the integral of Z is going to be a BMO martingale, and no, I don't get BMO because it's not bounded. So no, I get that Z is in any HP space, and I get that Y has, the supremum of Y has exponential moment. I think this is what I get. And it actually doesn't work well for me because this is not enough integrability. Because I actually need, as you saw somewhere here, over there, that one stochastic integral involving that guy is a martingale. And knowing that that guy is in every HP space is not enough to conclude that. So here it's a typical example where there is, I could get existence and uniqueness results, general ones for the BSD, but they are not exactly the ones I need in order to get all the integrability that I want. All right? So then I kind of have to produce the first argument that I showed you in order to make sure that everything works. There are other cases where it works perfectly well. There are some where the generator here is Lipschitz. That's plenty enough for you to do whatever you want. And in those cases, you should, it's much, much easier to just write this down, check that it's equal to the value function, you're done. Okay? So, but again, even in the very simple example that I showed you, it doesn't immediately work. So there is a balance that needs to be found here. Now, again, the reasoning that I showed you, there is nothing too hard. It's super classical in optimal control. If I make the problem more general, then you have additional subtleties that show up along the way. But again, all of this is known. You just have to adapt the arguments to your context. Okay? So somehow the meta theorem is that what I did in the beginning always works, the same way that you will always be able to prove that your value function is a viscosity solution to the Hamilton-Jacobi-Bellman PDE. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you can actually use a verification type argument. Okay? So the point here is that if a good well-posedness theory is available, we can start from the BSD and prove that it coincides with the value function. this is like a verification type argument. Okay, so just a point, if you look in the literature at some of those papers, some of them are doing this. They just start with this immediately because it's faster. And a lot of the others are going through everything that I showed you, adapted to the required context. Okay, so we've worked now all our way through the problem faced by the agent, and now I know that it's enough for me to look at contracts of this form, and I offer contracts of, when I offer them, I know exactly what's going on for the agent, I know the value, and I know the optimal contract. The problem is not done. We still have to go back to the problem faced by the principal and see what we can do with this. So that must be maybe 4. So what we have proved is the following. So remember, the problem of the principal originally was maximizing over contracts, then maximizing over efforts that were optimal for that contract. Exponential utility of the net wealth of the principal at capital T. What we just did shows that instead of doing this, I can actually just do sup over y0 greater than this. And remember, the utility that the agent gets with one of the contracts is minus exponential minus gamma a y0. So the participation constraint is satisfied as soon as I take y0 greater than this. Then you also have sup over z's in that class of what? Let's stick with the quadratic cost. In this case, that set for the contract y capital T that's somewhere over there is reduced to a singleton, so I know exactly what I'm doing here. This is the probability measure corresponding to that choice of effort for the agent. And now instead of psi, I just have to put this quantity here. So everything that we've done allowed us to write down the problem of the principal in that way. So from here, there is already one maximization that we can trivially get rid of. That's the first one. Where do I get y0 dependence here? Here. And if you check the dynamics of y, this depends linearly on the initial condition. In the drift or the volatility of y, the process y itself doesn't appear. So this is really linear dependence here. So now if you check the signs, there are 3 minus signs here. So this should be decreasing with y0. It's not too surprising. I'm just telling you that in that example, the value that the principal gets is a decreasing function of the value that the agent gets. So the more you have to give to the agent, the less the principal is getting. Careful, this is not always true that this is the case. Here, this works. I'll mention in a second what you can do to maybe change that. All right? This set here does not depend on y0 either. So the soup here is attained exactly on this value. So this is just exponential of plus gamma p. And y0 is this, so minus gamma p over gamma a. So this is minus r to the power gamma a over gamma p. Soup here of and here I just now write it with 0 instead of y0. Okay? So now I'm left with this here to compute. In general, at this stage, what I can say is that, well, this here is typically an optimal control problem with two state variables. X should be expected that X is still around here. And then I have this new state variable, which is, in this case, the certainty equivalent of the agent that is controlled by the process Z. So typically here, what you really have, if you go back to this is a standard stochastic control problem with state variables X. So what is dx? Dynamics of X, I'm interested in the dynamics under this measure. This was alpha t dt, so this is zt over c dt plus sigma dbz over c. And what's the dynamics of y? So if you go back, the dynamics of y should be, okay, if I'm not making a mistake, it should be c of zt over c plus gamma a over 2 sigma squared zt squared and plus sigma zt db z over c. All right, so I just wrote h as, well, it's attained when I take the optimal alpha, which is z over c, and there was a drift term that I put back in here so that I would go back to this Brownian motion and not the original one. So that should be the dynamics under that measure. But so yeah, then what I have here is kind of clear. Two state variables, one control. All right, and it's a nice Markovian optimal control problem. So at this stage, I could always tell you, well, at the very least, we brought back solving the problem of the principal to something that we understand, which is optimal control. Then you can write down an AGB equation for that optimal control problem, and hopefully try to be able to prove things, existence of smooth solutions if you're lucky, or at the very least you can start saying things about the problem. In this specific case, we're actually very lucky. I don't even need to write down the AGB equation. I can solve this by hand. But in general case, you would have to write down an equation. So again, how do you do this? The point is just that you replace x by the dynamics, you replace y by its dynamics, and something nice is going to happen that only works in this setting, basically. If I just change a little bit the problem, like maybe if my cost becomes state dependent or something like that, then this is no longer going to work. But you don't have to do it the way I'm going to show you. You can also really write down the AGB equation and figure out that you can find a smooth solution and do verification. That also works perfectly well. So here, if you look at what we have, take any z, if you check this utility here, okay, I'm not going to write all the details, but if you play a little bit with this, you're going to be able to show that I take all the drift terms in x and y, I put them together, and let me call this g of z. All right, so there are plenty of terms involving the function c, the squares, and so on. And here I can put another term that's going to be exactly minus gamma p sigma 1 minus z dbz, and then plus, then minus 1/2 sigma squared gamma p squared All right, so this is the stochastic integral that should appear, that you have, because x has sigma dB while y has sigma z dB. And I just add and subtract the corresponding quadratic variation here. So then I have an additional term that will go here. And what's the point of all of this? The point is, this is really just a function of z. And if you check it, this function is strictly concave in z. So I can always say that this is less than this z star is the t by t, omega by omega maximizer of this function. And it's not only deterministic, it's constant. So I can always upper bound this g by g of z star, which means now that deterministic, I get a capital T that's coming from the integral, I can take it out. And then what am I left with? A stochastic exponential. So same thing as before, expectation is less than 1. So this is equal to this, where this z star is in the argmax of g. So I have an upper bound. Is the upper bound attained? Yes. Take as a control z star, which is deterministic. Then, of course, I have equality here. And here, because z now is a constant, well, it's square integrable over 0t. So this is a Wiener integral. You know that this thing here is a true martingale, and it works automatically. So now here, everything works very well in the end because the z that you get is constant. If it were deterministic, it would also work. But if it starts being random, then, yeah, like I cannot just have a simple argument like this. And here then, upper bound And then you're done. You found the best possible Z. I mean, in this case, there is only one, but you find the best possible Z for the principal, and that generates the optimal contract. So the optimal contract is what? I don't have it anymore, but this is the terminal value of Y here. So if you look at what's going on, what do you have? There is a drift term, which is just a constant, right? It's an integral of this constant function of Z. So let me call this C0. This is a constant. And what matters the most for me is the stochastic integral part, where you have Z dx. Because Z is constant, this is simply Z star x capital T. And we are back with an affine contract in the terminal value of the project, which is what we already found in the first best problem in the static setting, when both the principal and the agent had exponential utilities. The fact that the optimal contract is an affine function of x capital T that also extends to the continuous time setting, that's really not an issue here. But for this problem, you do get that form of the contract, and when the cost is quadratic, you can actually compute Z explicitly. So if I am not making a mistake, this should be gamma p plus 1 over c sigma squared should be exactly equal to that. If you check now what we did 2 days ago, in the first best case that I just mentioned, the Z star is almost the same. You just get rid of the 1 over c sigma squared. So yeah, here the interpretation that Z star is always greater than the other. So you're just saying that when you are looking at the second best problem, there is an additional cost for the principal in terms of giving incentives to the agent. So he has to give her a bigger share of, no, the principal has to give the agent a bigger share of the benefits, which is why the Z star increases. And you can see that the dependence also is whether the project is very risky or not. So whether you have large volatility, whether cost of working is high for the agent or not. So you have a certain number of easy comparative statics you can make here. All right, so that's somehow the benchmark case in continuous time where all of this can be solved explicitly in the end. And yeah, you have this general method of getting all the way to the result. So now in the time that I am left with, I want to tell you, so now that was one example that we did. Can I do something like that in more general settings? And the answer is yes, up to a point. So this result that I showed you, that was already derived by Holmstrom and Milgrom in the original paper. I cannot tell you how they do it because I still don't really understand the proof. They certainly don't do it that way. The result is correct and they have the optimal contract that they should be getting, but they don't really do it exactly like that. I think actually in the original paper that they have the principal is risk neutral. But making the principal risk averse as long as its exponential utility doesn't cost you much in the end. No. that should be number 3. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about extensions. So I started with something that was quite specific for the dynamics in the problem. I just wanted to have this natural extension in continuous time of the static model where the output was Gaussian. But everything I showed you, like, yeah, you can follow all the steps, add some little ones in the middle to make sure that everything works, but that can be applied almost the same way. They're going to work if now you define something like this. So dynamics of X, no, here, sorry, I need to be a little bit careful. Yeah. So Pierre was insisting a lot about what happens in cases where sigma degenerates. That's also an issue for me. But if you give me dynamics of X, where volatility here is time dependent, and it can be also a non-Markovian functional of the path of X, and the drift here, so that guy can be n-dimensional, the Brownian motion can be d-dimensional, this can be a matrix that's n times d. The drift here would have the correct size, which I think should be d if I took that one n-dimensional. But as long as I have the correct form here where sigma comes in factor of b in the drift, I can do everything I want. So if you want to be completely correct here, the way you should do that one is you start here, you basically assume that there is a unique strong solution, if you want, of that SDE, assuming unique weak solution is enough. You don't need more than that. Then you do Girsanov, get these dynamics here. That works very well. I can make the cost and utility functions of the principal and the agent also more general. So I guess the best I can probably do would be something like this. If you take this here, you would still be okay with something like this. Yes. All right, so you can have general discount here that depends on time, the path of the state, the control. A utility here that, if you want, also depends on the path of the state and on the contract here. And then your cost function here, that's also more general. So just write something like that. It's also going to work. And for the principal, exactly the same. I don't know if that one is the most general, but most likely it should be close to that. So here, does that make sense? I think I can make sense of putting the control here. Let me explain why in 1 second. And then I can also add a running reward for the principal. I can also add continuous payments for the agent that will appear in the problem of the principal. That really doesn't change anything at all in the spirit of the proof. Here I was just hesitating a little bit about whether I should put the control because it's not observable by the principal. That's the control chosen by the agent. But if you think about it, what we do is that basically the principal solves the problem of the agent, so he anticipates what the control the agent will use is going to be, so it should be all right to plug it here. Because at the end of the day, I already plug it here, there, so it appears in the dynamics, so this should be, this should work as well. You can also add, as I said, continuous payments. This is just going to make your life a bit more complicated because everything is longer, you have to keep track of more things, but that just extends everywhere you want. Of course, if all my dynamics are non-Markovian, when I finish in the end with a stochastic control problem for the principal, it's going to be non-Markovian in general. But that's because I have put non-Markovian dynamics in y, in x. The added state variable y will not introduce additional non-Markovianity. That's the one I've imposed on myself from the get-go. Right? So if you want to go to something like this, no problem. This is going to work. Just have to be a little bit more careful because in all the reasoning I showed you, I used implicitly in several places that the filtration generated by X was a Brownian filtration, which is very useful. If I work at that level of generality, that's no longer true. So you have to be, just a little bit more careful. It still works, but there are additional steps here and there that you have to take care of. But otherwise, that works very well. The important thing is that sigma is not controlled. And this reasoning here, if you want, this is already implicitly known in the literature. Since this famous paper by Sannikov from 2008, where it takes a specific problem, but the way the arguments are taken are really exactly the same. You just take a contract, use martingale arguments coming from martingale optimality principle that tell you that yes, they will be able to find this Z process that kind of characterizes the problem of the agent, and then I go the other way around, and it's enough for me to look at contracts that have a specific form. The problem of the principle becomes stochastic control, and I write down a GB equation and I work from there. It's not written exactly like that, and it does take some time to be convinced that this is exactly what's going on, but that's really already what it's doing. What I showed you is just, okay, now you take the same idea, but you write it mathematically in a nice and proper way. The control of volatility, that's a little bit, I mean, the spirit is the same, the proof is harder, clearly. And that's something we've done with Nizar and Yaksha Zvitanic. Let me tell you a little bit how that one works. So that's and the papers 2017, something like that, I think. So there the issue that we have, so remember what I did, I showed you, I start from a generic contract, I have these arguments coming from martingale representation, and I get exactly the dynamics that I want. Okay, so I get a nice class of contracts for which I can do whatever I want. Here, what you can prove is that if everything is nice, contracts should have a form which is, so basically if I take this yt of xi as before, you would get that this is some y0 minus integral from 0 to t of some h. In general depends on x. It can depend on y, but let's not put it. You have z and which color can I not use? Red. There will be a new guy, gamma, here. Going to tell you in a second why, but the form would be exactly this one. And I have an additional term that comes here with the quadratic variation of x. So what is that coming from? So think about AGB equations. When you look at AGB equations for general control problem where volatility is controlled, in the Hamiltonian associated to the problem, the volatility is there. So that means that typically you should expect that your optimal control is going to depend on the gradient of the value function and on the second order derivative. When you control the drift only, the part that involves the second order derivative, which is the 1/2 sigma squared second order derivative, this goes outside of the Hamiltonian because it's not controlled. Okay? So that means that you should expect in general for the problems where you control the drift only, that your optimal control will only depend on the gradient. The gradient is z. That's exactly what that guy is doing here. It's non-Markovian, but fundamentally the z is associated to the gradient. So when I control volatility, this should not be enough. I should have something else. And the something else is gamma, which is intuitively associated to the second order derivative. And that guy shows up here. So now take the case where this is drift control only. Then actually in my Hamiltonian, this term is present. And it's uncontrolled, so it goes outside. There is a minus side. It simplifies with that one, so it's gone from the representation, typically. But if you control volatility, you should expect that that guy would be here. So I can, like the proof that we did at the beginning of the lecture today, you can reproduce it. If I give you a contract that has this shape here, you plug it in the problem of the agent, you solve it, super easy, everything works. Where you're going to be in trouble is that you will not be able to prove that starting from any contract psi, you will find y0, z, and gamma such that this representation holds, simply because this is not a correct result. You can find random variables psi that are nice and integrable such that this doesn't. So that's a little bit of a problem because my whole argument before was saying like, yeah, there is no loss of generality in writing contracts that way, and then I just have to choose z and gamma. The way out of this is that, yes, it may not be true that this representation always works. What actually is true is that the supremum of that the agent gets by maximizing over all contracts or maximizing over contracts of this form is the same. So the sets are not the same, but the supremum is the same. And it's typical thing where you try to maximize something and you just maximize over a set that's dense in the original one and you get the same value for the supremum. Okay? So the difficulty is to prove the denseness result and show that indeed there is no loss of utility for the principle there. But once you get that out of the way, then that works perfectly well. So typically now, the issue with volatility control, I would say, is that if I try to even explain to you how I get to things like that in ways that are mathematically rigorous, then it's just a mess. It's just a mess because it's weak formulation with volatility control that makes singular measures appear. You need quasi-source stochastic analysis. We know how to do all of these things, but this is not elementary and this is very technical. What I showed you with drift control, if you know stochastic analysis, standard one, you can follow everything I showed you. It's really not that hard. Here is much more annoying. So typically the way we think about this with Nizar and Yaksha is more in the sense of you can make sense at the intuitive level of why the contracts could look like that. Then you just take for granted that someone has been able to prove that there was no loss in generality here. And then you're good to go because now you're back again on your feet with the principle solving an optimal control problem with two state variables, the y, the x, but now two controls, not just the z, but also the gamma that appears here. All right, so making sure that all of this works is annoying. At the end of the day, it's not that hard. It's just annoying because you have to take care of many more like subtle issues. But at the intuitive level, I'm not changing much the reasoning compared to what I showed you earlier. All right, but the point really is that this still works. And you can just take the shape of contracts here for granted. Right? And somehow the intuition that you get from here, which actually is not that hard, and you just write down, assume that everything is Markovian in the problem of the agent, you write down the AGB equation for the problem of the agent, you take the value, assume that it's Markovian function of time and the state, you apply Ito's formula, and you will get this showing up. And the Hamiltonian shows up because according to the AGB equation, the time derivative of the value function is equal to minus, plus, I never know. It's equal to plus or minus the Hamiltonian. So in Ito's formula, the time derivative will be replaced by this. This is the space derivative, dx, and this is the additional quadratic variation term, second order derivative, quadratic variation of x. Right? So there is nothing mysterious at all. Just write down AGB equation, apply Ito, that form of contract just shows up naturally. Then you have to work to make sure that you're not missing out on anything. But getting this here is relatively straightforward. So I'm mentioning this because I think, at least that's how I've been trying to do it when you try to extend these things to other models that I'm going to mention now. Trying to figure out what is the correct class of contracts you should be working on is the important thing. Once you manage to figure out what the contract should look like, then the general methodology that I showed you kind of always applies, more or less. Of course, I can show you examples where nothing works. It's not that hard to come up with them. But in the cases where that works, trying to understand from the value of the agent what the contracts are supposed to look like is usually a very good way to start looking at the problem. So typically something where this is very useful is in problems with several agents. So there that's making a connection with what Pierre was telling you about. I showed you a model where there is one principal hiring one agent. You could easily think about models where one principal is hiring many agents and they kind of interact with one another. So here you can consider models where principal contracts with several interacting agents. One example, I mean, there are several examples in the literature, but maybe one that's more connected to the school here would be one that Emma worked on during her PhD, which is an extension of something that René, Aïd, Nizar, and myself worked on. Those are demand response program in electricity production, where basically the original model was electricity producer contracting with one consumer and trying to make the consumer change the way they would consume electricity to just gain flexibility on the demand side. You can have extension of the model where now you have one principal, a bunch of agents, which are the consumers. Those consumers live in a common environment, so there is some common noise impacting them. Think about temperature. If suddenly it's very cold, everyone is going to put the heating on at the same time, so their electricity consumption is correlated in that sense. And when I just say it like that, you should not really see why they're interacting, because if I put on my washing machine, there is no reason why my neighbor is also going to put on his washing machine, unless he just wants to annoy me. But the way this works there is that at the level of the principal, you have access to a lot of information. If you have a pool of consumers and they're identical for you, like same type of households, similar number of persons, you have a history on their consumption and they look the same, you can just try to tell them, look, in the contract, I'm going to keep track of your consumption, because I see that, right? I am not allowed to give you information about the consumption of other people, but I'm allowed to give you aggregate statistics about the consumption of other people. And you already get that. If you look at the invoices you receive, I think you would typically see some histograms that tell you, compared to the population that is similar to you, this is where your consumption is. So like on average, those people do this, you are doing this, or you are doing that. So you can use that information, which means you can use information about the distribution of the consumption of other consumers, other agents in the model. So that means now that principal would be offering a contract to a given agent that depends on his own state and on the distribution of the state of the others. And if you do that, you automatically create a game between everyone, because you know that, okay, how much the contract, how much electricity is going to cost me is going to depend on what I do, but it's also going to depend on the aggregate behavior of other people. And then automatically, if you pass to the limit in a model like that, you get mean field game problems. And that would be a case where you have one principal and a mean field of agents with common noise. So that one is Romuald, Emma, Thibault and myself. And all of this still works. So now the point is what? The point is that you're at the level of the mean field game between the agents, and Pierre has showed you several ways of understanding those mean field games. The way we do it is, so there is another paper that has a, part of it has a similar approach by Nizar and Adrien Barrasso, where the idea is to try to figure out, maybe Ludovic Tanpi mentioned something similar during this presentation, but for drift control problems. Anyway, the point here is more that you want to find some nice probabilistic representation of the solution to the mean field game problem. And this can be done, and by doing this, you can figure out a form of contracts. So here, this is this ethos formula when you have functions that depend on a process and the distribution of that process. There is an ethos formula there that gives you additional terms in the way the contracts look like, but you can still make this work. And the thing that I think is kind of nice in those problems is that you have this nice characterization for mean field equilibria at that level that gives you a nice class of contracts. Then you can go back to the problem of the principle, and what do you find typically? What you find is that the problem of the principle is now a mean field type control problem. So you take a principle contracting with agents that are looking for mean field equilibrium. Then you can prove that the problem of the principle boils down to mean field type control, which is also one of the things that Pierre was telling you about. At the intuitive level, once you understand how this works, it's not too surprising in the following sense. This y is supposed to be the value that the agent gets, and then you have x, but the dynamics of x is going to typically going to depend on the distribution of x now, because you are in a mean field game setting. So when I take the y and I write it in a forward way, then I will get a stochastic differential equation who's controlled by z, potentially gamma if you have control in the volatility. And what will appear there? The distribution of x. So what is this? It's a Makin-Vlasov equation that is controlled by z, and controlling Makin-Vlasov equations is exactly mean field type control. So once you kind of accept that what I'm telling you here still works at that level, it's not too surprising that the end game ends up being mean field type control. Of course, I'm saying that you can do this at the mean field level. You can also do it at the end player level. Typically, if you look at problems with n players, and they all control the drift of something, not the volatility, you also have old results. I mean, I told you in the beginning today that you shouldn't be surprised that I can relate BSDs with optimal control problem where you control the drift only. You also have results from the 90s already that tell you that some non-zero-sum games, when the players only control the drift, are naturally related to systems of BSDs. Not just one BSD, but a system. And again, it's intuitive. Think about all the components of the vector in the BSD as being the values of each agent. And what you're just saying is that when one agent is optimizing, is facing one optimal control problem, so his value satisfies the BSD. And when they're all maximizing together at equilibrium, they should all get the best possible there. So they should all have their value satisfying the proper BSD, and those things couple in a weird way, but that's more or less what happens there. So this also works completely well. It's just that it makes the dimension of the problem explode relatively easily. But let me just finish that before. So there, the problem of the principle boils down to mean field type control. So basically, I'm telling you that if you're doing a Stackelberg equilibrium on top of between a player and a bunch of players that are looking for mean field equilibrium between all of them, then that whole problem is just mean field type control. So I was saying you can also do n-player games. So here, yeah, like I don't know how to do it when you control volatility, that one. It's still very unclear. But Thibaut and Emma are working on that. So for drift control only, there are several papers now that do this. So I think, yeah, I have one with Romuald. There must be one with another student, Bastien Baldacci and Mathieu Rosenbaum. You've seen presentations already, a paper by, I'm not going to pronounce her name correctly, but that was Aurel, Laurière, Carmona, and the person that presented, where they were doing these epidemics models. Those are also examples of principal agents models where you have several agents somehow interacting with one another. So let me just put like a long list of names and apologizing for anyone that I forgot, but there are more and more people working on that now. And again, really the spirit of what I'm telling you now, it doesn't always work, but when it works, your point is agents are doing something, and solving of the problem of the agents should lead you to some sort of nice probabilistic representation for their value. So in the case that I showed you, the probabilistic representation is a BSD. When you have players playing with one another and they only control the drift, the representation is a system of BSDs. Then once you have that, what you can do is just take things the other way around, say, oh, when I take an arbitrary contract, the values look like this. I'm going to take it the other way. I'm going to select the Y's. I'm going to select the Z's. I'm going to select the gammas if they're there, and define contracts using that. And if it makes sense, and when you plug these new contracts for the agents into their value, you can solve the problem easily, then the literature tends to say that those contracts are revealing, because when you offer them, it is easy for you to figure out what the agents or the agents are doing. So if you can do that, then you will systematically transform the problem of the principal into some sort of control problem. So all the ones that can be attacked with that method lead to some sort of control problem. So I say some sort of control problem because, as I said, some of them are mean field type control, some of them are just standard control problems with a number of state variables that can be large. Typically here, if I have n players, I think the PD that I get in the end should have dimension 2n plus 1. Okay? That's typically what you get. So of course there are examples where things are explicit and you're very happy with that. But general models don't have anything explicit, so automatically the dimension that you get in the end, if you have to do numerics, that's a challenge. And more than that, the PDEs that you get are very annoying. I mean, I skipped completely over that because that's not the point, but if you go back even to the control model that I showed you in the example, you will realize that you have typically two state variables, but one Brownian motion, which means that your PDs are degenerate, there is not enough noise, and the volatility diffusion of all the states, all the ones that you get, is always degenerate. Like there is no way out of this. You always have some sort of degeneracy. which makes the theoretical analysis of the PDE hard. And there are some papers where I think we've been stuck for a year and a half trying to even look for weak solutions in Sobolev sense to the PDEs, and it just doesn't work. Like we don't know how to do it, and it's only in dimension 2, that one. So if you move above that, it's typically not going to work. But even if you don't care so much about figuring out whether you have some sort of smoothness for the solution, because viscosity solutions are always going to exist, that's fine. If you're not interested so much in like analytic properties of the solution, even numerically speaking, this is tough. If you go in high dimensions, the volatility starts degenerating in certain directions. We have one of those problems that we worked with Xavier Varin. So Emma is talking about that this afternoon, right? On applications of this to managing epidemics. And yeah, Xavier suffered to just be able to produce numbers there in a reasonable amount of time. The reasonable amount of time was, I think, the whole night. And there we had only 3 or 4 state variables. 3? 4? Okay, we had 4 state variables, and that was just a nightmare. On the other hand, I can give you examples of models where you have 10 state variables, but the problem is nice enough that numerically it works. Those are typically the models that Mathieu, Nizar, Thibault, Omar El Heuch have been working on for a while now. And there are other people that, Paul Jusselin as well. And those are related to market making. And in those cases, it's kind of everything I showed you, but with jump processes. And the good thing with jump processes is that if you only have pure jump processes, then the state space of your state is discrete, right? I mean, it's just pure jump, and it's a Poisson. It just jumps on the grid. And now this is killing one annoying thing with the dimension that you have is that in those problems, typically the problem of the principal can be written with ODEs. And if it's ODEs, even if they're coupled, and yeah, there are a lot of them numerically, it's fine. You can do it relatively fast. So in those problems, dimension is not an issue, but in general it is. So I think I mentioned something like that in the beginning. Yes, when I was talking about this Grossman and Hart approach to the static problem, where they just say, well, let's just assume that state space is finite. Let's just assume that there are only finitely many actions, and then I can solve everything. And I told you, yes, true. From the mathematical point of view, you can solve everything. But when once you want to do numerics, typically you will have a very large and very highly dimensional problem. What I showed you does not escape that. There is no way out. If the problem is high dimensional, it's high dimensional, and there is not much you can do there. The difference between the static approach and the continuous time approach is that maybe I don't know what to do with the problem in the end, but the class and the range of problems that I can bring back to some sort of optimal control problem in the end is significantly larger in continuous time than in the static or discrete time setting, right? We can understand and rewrite in a certain way the problems for many, many more. In the end, numerics is numerics. I hope that it's just a matter of power computing. I mean, that's not what I'm working on, figuring out how to do this efficiently. But this needs to be taken into account. Some of the models, you cannot make them too complicated because otherwise in the end you cannot compute anything. But I mean, most of you don't need me saying that to already be aware of this. All right, so maybe I will stop here. You will get this afternoon a certain number of applications. I think all the presentations more or less use at some point ideas that are similar to the ones I showed you. So yeah, that will be the illustrations beyond the simple model that I showed you, that these things do work. Okay, so thank you. I will stop here.
Thank you, Dylan.